Hey everyone, it's John from the Relic team. Today we're going to be diving deep on our latest update for Company of Heroes 3 2.1, which is going to be releasing on June 24th. Get ready for Opal Scorpion. We've recorded several interviews with the dev team to talk about all the latest additions to the game. So today we're going to be covering new maps, improved and refreshed gameplay systems, new cosmetics, multiplayer balance changes, and more. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the first segment. Now I am joined by none other than Will Ward, senior designer here at Relic Entertainment, to chat about the new maps coming in our Opal Scorpion update. Will, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
So it looks like you have a whole slate of new maps coming in this update. So it seems like you've been very, very busy at work. Can you tell us about some of the things that you've been sort of chipping away at since the last time we spoke to you?
Yes, yeah, this has been a very busy update for maps. We are planning to bring 5 maps to this update, 2 official Relic maps and 3 community maps into the roster, filling in those gaps where we need them.
Okay, excellent. So I think we shouldn't spend any more time spinning our wheels, and let's maybe get right into the first map. Can you tell me about this first one that we're going to take a look at?
Yes, we are finally bringing El Alamein to the multiplayer. This has been a map that I wanted to do for a very long time. El Alamein, for the uninitiated, is one of the most famous battles of World War II, and certainly one of the most famous in North Africa. But creating a map of El Alamein is kind of a scary notion. El Alamein was exceptionally flat, it was barren, it was an awful open span of land, and the battle that took place there was one of long-range weaponry and not very much cover. So creating it was foreboding, but
Right.
it absolutely had to be done.
Yeah. How do we make that battle interesting in a real time strategy game?
Yeah, absolutely. So like starting off with this map, I needed to look at. It was a completely different approach to how I would normally do maps. Normally, I would start with either territory or I would start with a gameplay flow that I liked. This time, I needed to start with the blockers, like the movement and sight blockers, because it's a desert. There aren't many of those around. So I needed to start with those so I had an idea of whether or not there were enough to actually build a map around. So things like buildings, anti-tank trenches, very few rock formations. And then once I had an idea of a flow that I liked using that, I could build the map on top of it. So very, very different process this time around. Deserts are hard, it turns out.
So it's interesting that you talked about a slightly different approach when you were building this. So does that change how I, as a player, should be approaching this map and employing different strategies with different factions, or was that more on more of an impetus on how you had to build it versus how I'm going to play on it?
We mention every time that we do these that we want to bring in new maps that change the way that you play the game or encourage new strategies, and that is absolutely the same here. Yes, when you're playing on a map like this, you do have to be far more cautious. So cover, for example, is more sparse, and what you do have is temporary. So before craters start appearing towards the late game, you are going to have to be relying on building more of your own cover. And things like smoke is very, very useful on a map like this because there are sections of it that are very open. I should also explain that the main core areas of this map will be the rail stop, the very famous rail stop where the only photographs of El Alamein actually occurred, which is a tiny train station just in the middle of nowhere. So you've got a small built-up area there where you've got some close quarters fighting and decent blind spots. But to the south of that, more towards the desert, you've got anti-tank trenches, which don't block sight but do block movement. So you've got a lot of smoke that will be required there to help vehicles move around without being molested en route. And setting up things like anti-tank guns and machine guns in that area is very easy because the sightlines are great. But then to the north, towards the coast, of the rail stop is the most open part of the desert in general. This is where artillery gun pits have been set up. So there's sandbags earlier on, but once those get knocked out, it becomes a very open and sparse map, and you will be cover hopping between craters, having to build your own sandbags wherever you possibly can. It's a challenging map to play. But that was entirely the intention, especially with our changes in previous patches with making defenses, constructible defenses, quicker and easier. I'm expecting to see a lot of sandbags, mines, and players employing their own cover where they can.
Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing some of the strategies that players employ once they get a chance to dive into El Alamein. So let's maybe move on to our next map, our 3v3.
Yes, on to 3v3s. So this is also another desert map. It became apparent when looking through a list of all of our maps, and I do this every couple of weeks. I look at how many Italy and Africa maps we have and try and keep a good balance of them, and I neglected to realize that we basically had no 2v2 desert maps outside of Camel Convoy, so I needed to rectify that. And 3v3 has a few desert maps, but still not really enough. So we are introducing Gabe's Gap, which is a 3v3 map based on the North African coast on the road to Tunisia. This was another challenging map because it's desert, but I couldn't resist.
Okay, well, what was some of the historical inspiration for Gabe's Gap?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite stories of the North African campaign, but it's actually quite rarely spoken about. It's the Battle of Wadi Akarit, or as it became known, Gabe's Gap. And it was one of the last great maneuvers of the North African campaign. Rommel's forces that were retreating up the coast towards Tunisia basically had a choke point. They had nothing but salt marshes and open desert to their south, and then they had the coast to the north. So they had this funnel that they could drive the British Eighth Army into. But instead of driving straight into the Marif line and being pounded, they did take the desert. They just went 100 miles into the desert in the middle of nowhere to get behind them. And where they appeared was at Gabe's Gap.
Okay.
And that's one of I believe one of the last maneuvers that Rommel was involved in before he was sent back to Germany.
Okay. So how did you approach your design with this map in particular?
Right, so I wanted to bring in elements that we don't have in very many of our maps. Especially considering the desert maps are obviously very sandy and very rocky. Well, we haven't done coastal desert maps yet. So I wanted to split the map into 3 segments. I wanted to have the beach be a core component, be a core lane, which is towards the north of the map. To the south, have this open desert, this inhospitable mountainous environment, and then have the salt flats right in the very center that players are pushing through. But because this is a wadi, this is actually quite a lush place. Mm-hmm. So even though you've got these pockets of very sparse and inhospitable land, where the water runs through the valley is very lush and green and vibrant. So it's got some really nice contrast throughout the map.
Okay, so as a player, what should I be taking into account when I'm engaging on this map? Like, what sort of notable features should I be watching out for, or what strategies should I be employing here?
Yeah, so this is another map where I wanted to try something a little bit different. So to facilitate the idea that you've got this inhospitable land right in the very middle of the map, there's no fuel in the middle of the map. Whereas all the fuel is kind of split between the mountains to the south and the beach to the north. Mm-hmm. So even though it's a 3v3 map, a lot of attention is going to be pulled towards the north and south sides. You obviously can fight in the map center, and there's munitions and things like that to still fight over, as well as a victory point. But it's less vital. So that third player is going to be split between trying to help out their friends on either side of the map so that they don't get neglected.
Okay.
But it is also an opportunity to dive through the middle of the map to get those cutoffs. If you can risk going through the open ground, through the salt marshes, you can cut off the resources for either the beach or the mountains. So it has some value.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about this one before we move on to the community maps?
No, not at all. Let's move on.
Okay, so like you said, we have 3 community maps that are going to be coming in this update.
Yeah.
Let's start with our 1v1.
Yes, okay. So we are obviously introducing 1v1s where we can. They are a competitive beast, so they take a lot of effort. Our community map this time around is one that's been waiting in the wings for quite a while. This is Tuscan Vineyards, and this is a return to form from K-Pen, who also created the remake of Faymonville for us, which we launched a long, long way back.
Yeah. So obviously we were working very closely with KPen on this. Can you maybe describe what that process looks like, just as a reminder? Because I know, it's not just pulling a map from the workshop and dumping it into the game. I know there's quite a bit of back and forth between you and the map maker to actually get it ready for the auto match pool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm always keeping an eye out for community maps. I'm trawling through our workshop at all times. We also have lots of discussion on our official Discord. Whenever I see a map that I'm interested in, whether it's because it seems a very polished piece of work, it's been very professionally done, which a lot of our community maps are, or it's a map that fills a gap that we don't currently have in our map pool, then that's usually an opportunity for me to reach out to the creator. And when we do so, we initiate them into a private group where we can discuss, play test, and look through more of an iterative process, kind of adapting the map to what we need it to be. Now, this can be very minor. It could be adjustments to cover and gameplay flow, or it could be like minor overhauls. It could be changing some core components of the map to make sure that it works the way we would want a map to work in the official map pool. This is a process that KPen and I have gone through before, but it still takes time. Like, everyone has jobs, they have normal lives, so working with community mappers isn't a very rapid and speedy process, but it is still very, very useful. And in that time as well, working with our community members, we're able to give them advice that will help them in the next step. If they wanted to create second or third maps further down the line, there's an opportunity to do so. This being KPen's second map for us is a testament to that.
Okay. So a quick word from KPen on that process. So they said, quote, working on Tuscan Vineyards for Company of Heroes 3 was a rewarding experience, bringing a map that was equally loved and hated back to life in a new setting, and in the updated Essence engine goes to show how far the franchise has come. It was great to talk to Will again to catch up, share ideas, receive feedback, and talk about the map making process. I wish I could make more maps, but making a map to a high standard takes time. Balancing life, work, and study means progress can be slow, and it's best not to rush these things. So, kind of speaking to exactly what you were just talking about
Yes.
there.
And I haven't really described the map at all. Obviously, you can see for yourselves. KPen is an artist. KPen makes some absolutely beautiful environments. This is such a lush, an interesting map. It's because it's a 1v1. It has a lot of interesting gameplay around, like hedgerows and high resource points, which are quite a challenge to fight over. But just the sheer amount of detail that's gone into this map, it's lovely. I can't wait for people to play it.
So what are, I know you kind of talked about some of the hedgerows and things like that, but what are some of the other sort of notable key points on this map that I should be watching for as a player? And again, what sort of tactics should I be employing here?
So this is what I call a push and pull map. So because the players are stationed in opposite corners rather than on an edge, so for example, like Road to Tunis has players on an edge, because it's on the corners instead, the map is quite wide, which means it's too difficult to hold a cohesive front line. You instead have to invest your forces in maybe a third of the map rather than half, and constantly push and pull towards cutoffs, trying to snatch resources from the enemy where you can, but the more that you push, the more at risk you are of being counterattacked.
Right.
Which is perfect for 1v1 maps where we have lots of flow and movement constantly, rather than more laney, bigger team game maps where you're kind of forced into your own little segment of the map and you're always fighting over the same place. So I would expect matches on this map to be very fluid, very aggressive, and very difficult to lock down.
Okay. Any final thoughts on Tuscan Vineyards?
No, not at all. Just looking forward to people playing it. It's been a long time coming, this one.
Okay. So next up, we have a map from the Sphinx.
Lorraine. So this is going back to how I mentioned before, how we usually curate maps. This is a map that as soon as I saw it, I just immediately fell in love. For those who aren't aware, Lorraine is a classic Code 1 map. It was easily one of my favorite maps from Co 1. I have very, very fond memories playing on it. It is a very heavily bombed out urban map, so it has very interesting segmented streets, lots of roads flowing towards the map center where this town square is, just gorgeously bombed out. The Sphinx, who has released other maps for us as well, this is certainly not their first rodeo. They are just so talented at creating these vibrant and interesting lived-in maps. Every single portion of this map tells a story of what it was like to be there. It's so well made. Yeah, for those who have played Co 1 and remember this map, I am sure they have fond memories of it. It was such a joy to play on, and I'm very, very proud to be bringing it back.
Okay, excellent. So another quick word from the Sphinx here. So they say, quote, to switch away from desert maps to Italian ones, I've decided to start with a remake. And when I thought about which one, Lorraine from Co 1 was the favorite on my list. Not only is it nostalgic, but it is also perfectly reflects an Italian village on the side of a hill with its different heights. A big thanks to Will for always being available to help the mapping community with any questions or problems. It is a special compliment when a map catches his eye and gets chosen for the map pool. Strategies for Loren here. What are we looking at with a map that is very like close quarters in this regard?
I can see this being a contentious map from the very start because it is an urban map. It is a close quarters map, and there are some styles of play that just don't gel with that. But for those who dare, because it's close quarters, you're going to be relying very heavily on your early engineers, flamethrowers, grenades, satchels, mines. The amount of blind spots and narrow pathways in this map, they're everywhere. It's very, very easy to ensnare vehicles. So you'll be relying probably more on your indirect fire, artillery to try and support pushes up, because HMGs will have limited lines of sight, and it'll be easy to push up on them. Light vehicles will be very successful on the outskirts of the map, where there isn't so much of a narrow, ruined layout. But you'll also be relying on shock vehicles, things like the Stug D, the Brumbar, the Matilda, to soak up that damage on their front armor as they push through the map center, the urban center. This is going to be a very, very interesting map to see.
Okay. I'm also looking forward to seeing matches on this map. I think it'll be a little bit interesting, and again, force players to get out of their comfort zone a little bit.
Absolutely.
And I'm super excited for this next one. By God, that's Red Ball Express's music.
Yeah.
Will, I know this has been a fan favorite for a long time. Tell me about getting Red Ball Express into the map pool.
Yeah. Just hearing Red Ball Express, I can think of two ways that people might say it. They might go Red Ball Express or Red Ball Express. It's many hours of pain and drudgery on that map, or it is just a pure joy. It is easily the most requested team game map from the franchise.
Yeah.
And this has been lovingly recreated by Dutch Toast, this is his debut into the community mapping world, and it's an exceptional job from the off. This is a very, very well put together map. Very challenging and very ambitious to jump into a 4v4 map as your first one. But here we are.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll jump into what Dutch Toast had to say here from working on this map. So they say, without prior experience, I started mapping using the excellent 101 tutorial series from the official Company of Heroes YouTube channel. This has been a passion project, as I love the original Red Ball Express in Co 2 so much. I was delighted with the subsequent community feedback and the call from John and Will expressing a desire to have this map integrated into the game all the way back in December of 2024. Since then, I've worked closely with Will to create a separate, highly polished version for you to enjoy. This has been a really worthwhile learning experience, and it was a pleasure to work with Will on making this happen. I also want to thank the community who have shown incredible love for this map and encouraged me to take it to the next level. Your passion is contagious. It's incredibly exciting that my work is now part of the enduring legacy of the Co franchise, and I can't wait to see you all enjoy my vision of this classic map.
Yeah. I recall as well when this first got released. I think you were the one to message me and go, "Red Bull Express. You seen Red Bull Express?" Like, yes, I've seen Red Bull Express. Yes, we'll get in touch with Dutch. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I got quite a few messages that day.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about working with Dutch Toast and bringing this one into the map pool. Because again, like you said, it's a fan favorite,
Yeah.
slightly contentious, but like it wouldn't be a Company of Heroes 4v4 match if I didn't have to play on Red Ball Express at least once, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so when we brought Dutch into the fold and had a look at the map, because it was an early map for him, we had to make sure we go through the whole process, making sure we're looking for little mistakes, little pitfalls, because mapping is difficult, mapping takes time, and making a map look good and making it play good are usually very different things. So we went through quite a detailed process of. Um, First off, we actually started with the visuals of it just to make sure that clarity of vision was very good. So the map, for example, was very dark to begin with because it is a very muddy and it's a very dusky map. So we went through the visuals first, kind of pulled the atmosphere where we wanted it. Normally, atmosphere would be a very early thing I do in my maps. I want to know what direction the shadows and the light are going so that I can build the pathways and the flow with that in mind. You'll notice that if you spin the camera on our maps kind of in the opposite direction to where the default camera is, the map sometimes just won't look right because it was entirely designed around that lighting, that whole setup. But once we had the vision in place, we had the atmosphere where we wanted it, and we had just a generally good idea of what the map should look like. We started going through playtesting, looking into is the cover fair, is the amount of sight and shot blockers fair. For those who don't know Red Bull Express, it is a very heavy lane map. The map is split into 3 major lanes. Kind of a farmyard lane towards the top of the map, a lumber lane towards the middle, and then a forest and manor towards the south. So you've got 4 players on 3 lanes, so naturally it's going to be chaos. But we wanted to make sure that you have good interactivity between those lanes as well. One of the core components of Red Ball Express is that you are separated by hedgerows that you can crush. So in the early game, you can't easily move and help your teammates. You have to backtrack to go and get around these hedges and move onto their lane to support them. But in the late game, when the heavy tanks come out and those hedgerows get flattened, the whole map opens up and it plays completely differently, which is probably why it's so fascinating a map. So we wanted to make sure that that all works the way that it should from beginning to end. And it's a process because it's an 8-player map. There's a lot of map to look at and a lot of map to balance.
Yeah.
So working with Dutch, he was excellent. He put a lot of time into this. I'm sure his family missed him for the time that he was working with me. But yeah, it's going to pay off. Like, this is an exceptionally well-made map. And it is a fan favorite. So glad to have it in the roster at last, and I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I've enjoyed working with Dutch on it.
Okay. So will this version of Red Ball play very similar to the past version? Like, obviously, Company of Heroes 3, we have totally different factions with totally different unit rosters. So how do I need to approach this? Is it still sort of that classic 4v4 slugfest that I know and love? Or do we need to sort of think about this map a little bit differently than we have in the past?
There is no denying it will be a slugfest. It should play very familiarly, but the opportunity to play on it with new units and the new tools that we're bringing in will certainly shake up how it plays. The early game, for example, will be very different on this map. Because there's a limited amount of space and territory to capture, your ultralights will have a lot of use very early game, but then start falling off pretty quickly. And things like light vehicle rushes could be very, very dominant on this map because you can push quite deep into your lane without the enemy being able to move across and help out. You can be very aggressive with units like the L640. Or even something as early as the 221 scout car. But we all know that this map is eventually just going to divulge into artillery spam and heavy tanks. There's no denying that this is exactly what Red Ball is, and I would be remiss if I were to pretend it's anything different.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that kind of covers all of the new maps that are going to be coming in the Opal Scorpion update. But Will, I know you also wanted to give a special shout out to the recently passed map making competition that was hosted by GB Pirate.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, the competition is now over, and the winners have been declared. I wanted to just give out a huge thanks to everyone who took part. A big thanks, especially to GB Pirate, who organised this. This was a lot of work, a lot of spare time went into this, and trying to manage all the entrants that we had. This was a far bigger than our previous mapping competitions. We had a very, very large number of maps to sift through. And the quality that they came in was astounding. Like, I could not believe how well made some of the maps were that came in from this competition. I'm very, very impressed. And it shows that the community is growing with the game. I feel like our tutorial series that we made many, many moons ago has helped out, but now people have just moved far past that.
Right.
The standard, it was incredible. So very, very well done to everyone who took part. And we plan to start integrating some of these the competition maps into future updates. So do keep your eyes peeled. On the back of that as well, we mention it every single live stream that we do, but we do have feedback forms for our individual maps. So if you go onto our official Discord, there is a map feedback section. Please don't hesitate to leave feedback for us, especially for these 5 new maps that are coming out. We can never playtest in office as much as you folks can. So you will find bugs, and I will fix them. And don't hesitate to give mapping a try yourself. We do also have a little map section in the official Discord where our very passionate mapping community will be on hand to answer any questions and help get you started. They're a very, very nice bunch.
Okay, excellent. So, Will, as we wrap up here, final thoughts on the 5 new maps that are going to be coming in this update.
Yes, so as always, I can't wait for all of you to play these, to just sink your teeth into them. We've tried where possible to have a broad spread, because we had a lot of 1v1 maps in our previous update. So this time we're kind of spreading across the entire group. So we have a map for every category and then some. We are constantly trying to push the ways that players engage with our maps. We always want you to try different things. So give them a try, see how you feel, and leave feedback if you have any feedback. But generally, I just hope you all enjoy. This has been an absolute joy to work on, and I look forward to the next time.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much, Will. I and the rest of the community always appreciate all of your hard work. So thank you, and we'll end things there and just move on to the next segment.
All right.
Okay, and now I'm joined by 2 folks from the team to talk about gameplay improvements. You've probably recognized these folks. Let's do some quick introductions. Let's start with you, Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric Roble, the design director for Company Heroes 3.
And Darren.
Yep, my name's Darren Chen, and I'm one of the gameplay designers for Company of Heroes 3.
Okay, so obviously we're here to talk about some of the refreshed gameplay stuff that we're doing in the Opal Scorpion update. But before we get to that, Eric, I know you kind of wanted to quickly touch on, the scope of this patch and maybe some of the other stuff that we've done recently. So let's maybe start there.
Yeah, so we just finished up the 205 update, and that update was kind of focused on honing in the balance from the previous update, because we added a whole bunch of changes to the game in general, as long as new battle groups. So the idea is when we put new content in the game, the balance is going to get a little bit looser because it's a lot of different stuff, new things to do in the game. Then these incrementals, we're kind of like honing in on the balance. So that brings us to the 2.1 update that we've got going on now. And in general, this is not going to be like a massive update for people. So there's a number of like quality of life things and improvements and stuff like that. We always look at balance, and specifically, right, we're trying to make it so that there's more really effective strategic paths. So there's more effective ways to play the game. So there's more strategies and there's more variety, and it's just more fun to play the game, basically. So continuing to do that, focusing on quality of life stuff for 2.1, and of course we have big fun things coming in the future as well.
Right. So I know we've already teased battle groups coming at the end of this year. Obviously, we can't say too much about that right now, but I know the team is very, very hard at work on that. So let's maybe get into some of the gameplay improvements that we're going to be seeing in this update. Darren, I'm wondering if you could maybe start with some improvements that we're doing with towing.
Yep. So we are doing some improvements to towing. This is like a cleanup of some of the initial changes that we did a while back. This is making it a bit more responsive, cleaning up some of the bugs with towing. We are also speeding up towing in a number of ways. One, your units will instantly load into the half track once the gun has hitched onto the vehicle. You no longer have to wait for the crewmen to start walking toward the half track.
Okay.
Because that takes valuable seconds, between like 3 to 4, depending where your crew members are. And I believe we've also made it so that the gun will now align faster with the half track, while the half track is also aligning with the gun, rather than, all right, half track aligns, then the gun aligns, now we hook up.
So it can be twice as fast, basically, if they're both pivoting at the same time.
Okay.
And yep, a lot of general cleanup to the issues that towing has had.
Right. Yeah, I know we have a lot of complex mechanics within the simulation that is Company of Heroes 3, so glad to hear that we're able to clean that up a bit. Next up on my list here, we have instant reload abilities. From my understanding, this is a bit of a bug fix, but can you kind of explain what the behavior is here?
Yep. So it's a bit of both a bug fix and a quality of life change. So, we've made a change so certain weapons can now just fire immediately when you give the order. So an example would be like the Chaffee smoke shell. Before, if the Chaffee had fired its main gun, then you'd order it to give the smoke command. You would need to wait for the gun to reload before you could fire smoke. Now you can fire the main gun, fire smoke immediately after, but we've also made the fix to ensure that if you fired the main gun during the smoke ability, or fired the main gun prior to the smoke ability, you'll still keep that reload time from before. So you can't really, so it allows more responsiveness on like fast abilities that you want, like smoke, without generating issues where you can be like, I fire the main gun, fire smoke, fire the main gun again.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't want people to like find these like frame cheat cooldowns where they could like increase the damage of their vehicle, basically.
Right.
And so because of that, we've only applied this to specific types of like utility kinds of abilities, right? So anything where it's just their special attack is like a damage thing, we haven't applied this to that because we don't want you to be able to like burst and multi-fire and kill something really fast, right? But in the case of, like Darren's saying, of smoke, that's kind of like a utility thing, and we want there to be a consistent experience. Versus right now, when you say use this ability, you might have to wait 4 seconds for the ability to fire, or you might wait like half a second based off of what the cooldown of the main weapon was. So you didn't really know exactly what was going to happen when you click the mouse, and now it's always going to fire the ability when you say put the smoke here.
Okay. Sounds good. Next up on the list, we have auto reinforce.
So this is more about keeping a reinforcement in queue before. If you left the reinforcement radius of, like, say, your base, any reinforcements that you had in queue would just disappear and all the progress would be lost. This was especially bad if, like, you say, I'm bringing some of my units out of the base while they're reinforcing, but you might have that squad who's still, like, 5 out of 6. They're, like, 75% of the way complete to reinforcing that last guy. You step just 1 meter too far out of the reinforcement range, and, well, now you gotta go back into the circle and wait the full amount of time. Now, with the new change, any reinforcements that you have queued up, and the progress of that, reinforcement who is in the queue will be saved. This is particularly useful for units like the U.S. Paratrooper, where they have a very lengthy reinforce time if they're reinforcing in the field. So if you get them into a fight while they're still waiting for reinforcements to drop in, your progress will now be saved, and if you leave that combat zone, you will resume from where you started it without having to, essentially wait the full duration again.
Okay,
which will also make it easier.
Eric, is this like a huge buff to forward reinforcement, or does it just sort of like smooth things over when I'm micromanaging my units in the field?
So is it a buff to forward reinforcement? Yes. Is it a
Okay.
huge buff? No.
Okay.
It's really geared at the players like me who aren't that good at the game, and they like accidentally like move the guy a little bit too far, and it's like, oh no, I have to refresh the whole timer. Versus if you're at 99% of the way done and you go back in now, it'll just pop for you and be done, and then you can go back on your way. So it's
Okay.
it's more like kind of quality of life type of thing than really like a huge buff or anything.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. I know we also made a slight change to Rex. So can you tell me about what we're doing there?
Yep, so we did a change to Rex regarding mainly their crush type. So things like the medium tank Rex, we haven't changed anything on the ultralights and the light vehicles. Or I think we actually did move ultralight into light crush, so ultralight vehicles cannot crush other ultralight Rex.
Okay.
Rex, but the main change is that our medium tank Rex are now heavy crush, and heavy tank Rex just cannot be crushed at all.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So one, this creates more interesting gameplay where like you could kill the lead tank of a tank charge to stall out those other tanks, but it's also a quality of life improvements because sometimes you'd be like, hey, I want to go recover or salvage that wreck from like one of the heavier tanks in the game. One of your allies or maybe one of your own units runs into that wreck,
Right.
crushes and destroys the wreck, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
I needed that. Give it back, please. But
You oftentimes will have an army where you have 2 or 3 medium tanks, right? And then so when one of them dies, the next ones would just keep rolling forward and like destroy it almost instantly, right? So the Rex oftentimes had very little impact on the gameplay, whereas we wanted it to, it's like changing things up of like, oh, now there's this physical thing in the game world and you have to like, do I go around it? Do I try to like attack it and blow it up? And then, or do I want to try to like salvage it, right? Like this is a resource. So these resources will be persisting a lot longer on the battlefield now, which is adds some interesting strategic considerations and depth to the game.
And I guess there's also a bit of a added immersion there where like my light vehicle isn't going to like completely blow up, a heavy tank wreck that it comes across, right? Okay.
And it also creates more persistent objects on the battlefield because, it's much harder to remove them. While also making units that are able to crush those specific types of wrecks more important.
Okay, very cool. So I'll be interested to see feedback around that because I'm sure players will have a lot to say. So I think the bigger change that we've made, or sort of I think we've almost entirely overhauled this system, and I know it's one that's been a bit of a pain point for players for quite some time. So tell me about changes to Breach.
All right, so yeah. On the back of the box, one of those items for Company of Heroes 3. We finally did. We done, some very large, significant changes to Breach because for the user, it didn't really feel like a useful tool. Most of the times, it was better to just blast an enemy out of garrisons rather than wait on like, all right, unit is in animation. Unit now has kicked the enemy out, needs to walk in through the front door, and then claim the building, which could take anywhere between 7 to 12 seconds, depending on how things were going with the breach. So we've sped it up significantly, but it's not going to be instant, but now it's going to be a very useful tool for like clearing garrisons, getting people out of buildings. Like it doesn't need to cause damage all the time, but it always forces your opponent to be on the lookout for breach and bail out of buildings, and then that allows the person who's breaching to just claim those buildings much faster.
Okay.
So
Eric,
before you were saying like 7 to 12 seconds, so what kind of timeline can people expect?
If we're looking at like when the guys are actually at the door and breaching into the building, we're probably looking around 3 to 4 seconds to enter the building now.
So it's less than half the amount of time. It's like a significant speed.
And we've also done some speed ups, like when the units are heading toward the door, they will now get a speed bonus when they're running toward that entrance rather than just walking over like
if you're breaching a building, you're not just gonna walk there, right? Like
it's just a casual Tuesday.
So
breaching on a Tuesday.
Eric, can you tell me about like what was sort of the impetus for us addressing this system and making these changes? So if we're making it faster, I'm assuming it'll be a little bit more effective. But like in terms of like how I'm approaching a match and picking specific units and specialties, why am I going to pick the units now that have a breach ability? And what is that going to do for me in my matches going forward?
Yeah, so some of the strategic considerations we want for players is what map am I playing on? And okay, I'm playing on this map. what are the locations where the enemy is likely to be garrisoning or not garrisoning things, right? So it's like, oh, okay, actually there's not a lot of buildings on this map. I don't really need to like worry about it versus like, oh, this is a big dense city. I know there's going to be a lot of play here, so I'm going to make more of these breaching units than I would have normally. So we want to try to like have the maps like mix up the gameplay and the meta a bit.
Okay. So Darren, what else can you tell us about the changes to Breach here? I don't know if there's any sort of change to the different units that have access to it or how they utilize it.
Well, on the breach itself, we'll go through that before hitting units. Breaching, we did the change where rather than people needing to walk through the door after like you commence your breach, once the enemy is out of the building and the building has gone neutral, your units will just teleport in. This goes for both if you are breaching or if you're breaching the building and the enemy gets out while you're running up to the door, you'll just teleport in once you're within a certain radius rather than having to walk in, so the enemy doesn't really have time to get out and throw a grenade at the door entrance.
Right. Okay.
Same as like if they're partway through the breach animation, you just teleport in if the enemy's bailed out at that point, so you just claim the building.
Okay.
And on top of that, for the breaching, we do allow you to interrupt it. So if you're in a bad spot with the breaching, unless you're at the very end of the breach where the damage portion is caused, which would allow you to claim the building regardless, is you are able to just cancel the breach at any time. So you keep control of your units, because one of the big issues with breach before is at one point during the breach animation, you just lost control of your units and they would sit there for like 3 to 4.
So if a grenade happened, you were locked in, you had no way
Right.
of getting out of it, right? Yeah.
As for the units themselves, we're keeping what our current roster is for who currently has a breach. The only unit that has gotten an additional function to act as breachers is the guards foot section for the British.
Oh, okay.
It makes sense for them because, they have a grenade, they have submachine guns.
Yeah.
They do come a bit later than the other breaching squads, so the UKF doesn't really get a breacher in the early game. Technically, you could use Royal Engineers, but it was also an odd one because you have the flamethrower,
Yeah.
so why
Just
not
kill them? Why worry about running up and breaching,
Why
right?
breach when you could just burn them out of the building?
Right.
But it does give UKF the ability to breach buildings in the late game if they go that specific squad. USF is probably the most powerful if they're going the barracks build on urban maps, just because every rifleman can breach a building, so people have to watch out for that against the faction if they're playing on urban maps, where USF will likely just kick you out of most of the garrisons if they get the chance.
Okay. Eric, are there any other considerations here with Breach? I know briefly before we started recording this, you mentioned something about players that are mostly focused on comp stomps or single player. That Breach may be a little bit different with the AI.
Yeah. And the goal of these changes, right, is we wanted Breach to be an effective gameplay tool, right? And it just wasn't with like the unresponsiveness and the total amount of time, right? It's like, well, you commit that much time, it's like you could have just shot the guy and killed him in some cases, right? So we wanted to make it combat effective. We wanted to make it a powerful thing that you could do. And so it took us a while to get to Breach. Like, we know it's been a problem for a while, but there were just so many other like things in the game we wanted to fix. So we feel like now like balance is in a good state for a lot of the different units, so we're able to focus in on some of these like nitty gritty details basically. But the AI is not as smart as people, so it didn't know Breach was bad, and the AI loves breaching. It will breach you every chance it gets, right?
Yeah.
So now that Breach is actually good, though, the AI isn't nerfing itself by using this ability. It's actually using an effective ability. So it's kind of cool that the balance, quote unquote, of like the skirmish matches against the AI have gotten a bit harder now that Breach is an effective thing to do.
Okay. Very cool. Something I'm gonna have to watch out for when I'm capturing footage in the future here. Okay, cool. Any other sort of final thoughts, Darren, on some of the, either on Breach or on the other changes that we're making in 2.1?
I think this patch is bringing a lot of quality of life that people wanted to systems that have been neglected, particularly as we just talked about Breach, which has been 2 years since launch. So, but hopefully players will feel like a massive difference when they're playing with Breach, and will find it as a very useful tool. I know, a number of us in playtesting have found the new Breach to be like very potent now to just take garrisons from the player, where normally is like, I'm not really gonna breach that building, even if you were capable of doing it.
Right.
So,
Okay.
And we kind of view Breach as like a core combat mechanic. So that's why we wanted to make sure all 4 of the factions had access to Breach. So that's part of the reason we added to the foot guards. But we also like the asymmetry of it, that different factions can get access to Breach at different times during the game. So it really, matters what opponent you're playing against, and then also like what build they're doing, for example. Because like sometimes US doesn't go for a rifleman build, right? But they might be more incentivized to do that on certain maps.
Okay. Eric, any other sort of final thoughts on the system or gameplay improvements here for Opal Scorpion?
I think we hit them all. I mean,
Okay.
it's like you made a list beforehand, and then we just covered all the talking points or something.
Oh, it's almost like we have a plan, a sinister plan. Cool. Well, I think we can probably end things there. Thank you so much, Darren and Eric, for your time. I know players will probably appreciate a lot of these changes, but again, please leave us your feedback. We're always listening, and we can always hopefully adjust things in the future. So we'll just call it there, and we'll head to our next segment. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and keep playing more Company Heroes 3.
All right, and now I'm joined by a very special someone to talk about new cosmetics coming in our Opal Scorpion update. So KJ, for those that are unfamiliar with your contributions to Company of Heroes 3, can you tell us who you are and what do you do on the game?
Yeah, so KJ or Kirk Jr. Benedega. I'm also known as KJB_RE in Discord and in game. I'm a senior producer here, focused on everything kind of release management as well as kind of live operations.
Okay, amazing. I in my mind, KJ is the person that gets things done and keeps the train rolling. So, I think he has a very important job here. So I'm glad you have some time here to chat with us about cosmetics, which I know a lot of players have been really asking for since we kind of paused work in that field a while ago. So maybe let's just start there, KJ. Why did we pause work on cosmetics a while back?
Yeah, so cosmetics, why did we pause? Well, as you know, the launch went the way that it did. A lot of the feedback was for us to pause, so we listened and we paused, and we moved those people onto fixing the core game. Now with the release of 2.0, we've started receiving a lot of feedback from you that we should do more cosmetics, so we're listening and doing that.
Okay. So I know some of the ones that we're going to be showing off here were already in progress when we paused. So I imagine we're just kind of finishing those and releasing what we've sort of had in the bank.
Yeah, so the sentiment after launch, we just made a harsh stop. So many of these you data mined and got some certain insights. We've changed a lot of them up since then, as you'll kind of see with our Desert Rose cosmetic. I can speak a bit to that a bit later. And we just resurrected that and fixed a lot of issues with our tools that aged, and excited to kind of get the feedback on this round of cosmetics.
Okay. So before we start showing off some of the new stuff that we're going to be releasing here, I know there's always lots of questions and feedback about cosmetics, how we're doing things, why we make certain decisions. So I kind of wanted to put a couple of those questions to you first. One of the points of feedback I see is, well, you do cosmetics for the core rosters of each faction. Why not battle group units? So I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to that.
Yeah, so basically we look at playtime, what people are going to see the most and play the most, and how many people actually buy battle groups, and then how much playtime those other battle groups get. Right now, we really wanted to focus on getting 4 legendary packs, 1 for each faction out, so someone who mains a certain faction has something new, and that played a big reason. But again, we're open to listening. We want to hear from you. If you want those skins for specific battle groups, that's something that we can look into. But again, if you're willing to spend for it, that's definitely something that we can do.
Yeah, and I imagine it's a bit of give and take as well, right? Because I know when you and I were chatting about this before, it was kind of like, well, we could maybe do that, but would it be better for us just to do whole new cosmetic sets? So I think there's a bit of give and take there that we need to consider as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. Since we've been paused on the cosmetic front for as long as we definitely wanted to get back into giving something more new and fresh, and then kind of revisit that.
Okay. So the other piece of feedback that I often see is like, I'm grinding through my challenges. I'm getting my dailies done, my weeklies done. I've got all this merit. What am I supposed to do with all this merit? So, KJ, I know that's something that we're also really thinking about. With the merit that players can earn, and obviously the war bonds that they can buy. So, how are we going to be pricing things in the store, and are we actually going to be giving players enough things that they can earn and unlock with the merit that they've probably saved up for the last little bit?
Yeah, so if you've been collecting your merit or even war bonds for that matter over time, all of our new legendary cosmetics are going to be dual currency. So you'll be able to spend either or on the whole set.
Okay, amazing. That's great to hear. So let's maybe actually get into these sets because I know that's the exciting thing that players want to see. So we'll have some footage of these up right now. But let's talk about these. So I know you mentioned some legendary sets, and we have 4. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So one for each faction. So diving into kind of the Wehrmacht faction, we have our War Torn cosmetic. This was something inspired by seeing photos and troops of like the Battle of Berlin, getting down to very little resources left. So we really wanted to show kind of the beaten down, worn down version of the Wehrmacht. So in this set, you'll see custom props and stuff that we've added to tanks, torn cloth on tank barrels and on the side, a lot of kind of grit, if you will, added to a lot of the kind of the textures in the units, and kind of showing just how much they're on kind of their last stand.
Yeah, like very much at the bitter end of the war. Okay, let's talk about the U.S. forces here.
This we wanted to kind of look on the amphibious assault side, the frog side, if you will, and definitely kind of looking at how they approached amphibious assaults in kind of the Italian landings as well. So this was definitely more of a inspiration on that front, and kind of pulled a lot from that.
Yeah, this isn't teasing anything. We just wanted to do a cool, a cool sort of Marine Corps themed set. So I really like this set as well. I think it really pops out and will work well with some of the new maps that are also coming in Opal Scorpion. What do the British forces have installed for us?
This one might be a bit contentious, but I assure you it comes from historical reference, especially on the Mountbatten kind of paint and camouflage tone kind of used in Africa. This was inspired by that. We added our own kind of camo pattern take to that, but we really hope that gives a bit of variety, and it may give an advantage on some of our desert maps too.
Yeah, and again, this definitely does have historical inspiration. It's kind of mimicking the light of dawn or dusk against the sand, and there were a lot of examples of this type of camouflage being used, during the Second World War. I really think it pops and it looks great, so I'm excited to try these out.
Yeah, they used it on everything from ships to planes to tanks, kind of all over. So it was pretty widely used.
Yeah. So I'm also looking forward to the cosmetics that we have for the Africa Corps. Can you tell us about these?
Yeah, this was based on some of the desert tigers in North Africa, and kind of exploring kind of the two-tone nature of some of our kind of skinning and tech and tools, and really again giving kind of the DAC that desert camo kind of skin to kind of again use on some of our kind of desert maps. I personally like the kind of the two-tone and it fading into more of like a charred back. And kind of might give you advantage on the field if your players think your tank's destroyed.
Yeah. So we'll let some footage run of all these cosmetic sets again for a bit here, because again I think they're really striking. They look really cool. So KJ, these are all going to be hitting the store at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're going to be releasing all 4 packs at the release of 2-1, and you'll be able to get them for merit and war blends in the store.
Okay, cool. So I think KJ, you also have another surprise of. I know there's a cosmetic set that we were releasing here and there over the last year that was very exclusive. Not everyone could get it.
That's right.
Can you tell me about what we're doing with the Night Fighters?
Yeah, our Night Fighter skin. So we did 14 releases on Amazon Prime, a part of that. and it was a timed event. So we're now at a point where we want to slowly bring those back in the store as well. So over the course of 14 drops, we'll be re-releasing a lot of those Night Fighters again for merit or war bonds.
Okay, so if I didn't have Prime Gaming before and I couldn't get those, now's my
Now's your
chance and I can
chance.
pick them up. Okay, that's
right.
great. And again, we'll be dropping those out sort of incrementally, over the coming weeks and months. So I got something to look forward to there. KJ, any sort of final thoughts as players get ready for Opal Scorpion and the release of these cosmetic sets?
Eager to get your feedback as always, and keep us humble. And I hope you enjoy.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, KJ. Let's end it there and move on to the next segment. And now I am joined by our multiplayer balance team to talk about all things multiplayer in our Opal Scorpion update. So for those that don't know them, some quick intros. Darren, tell us, who are you and what do you do on the team?
Yep. My name's Darren Chen. Used to know me as Mirage Fla back in the day on Twitch. And I'm one of the gameplay designers for Company of Heroes 3.
And Jason.
Hey, I'm Jason. I lead balance here on Co 3.
Okay. So Jason, obviously in the last few months, we've had our 205 tuning update patch, and now we're here to talk about the 2.1 multiplayer balance changes. So maybe you could cast your mind back and tell me a bit about what we were doing in 205 and what we've wanted to sort of do since then. Like, what were your like big picture objectives with that sort of balance tuning update versus what we want to do here in Opal Scorpion?
Yeah, so in '05, kind of the idea was to tighten up balance after the Omega 2.0 patch went out. With the inclusion of any new content, there's always going to cause new issues, and we wanted to leave the window open to do major adjustments. So we spent a lot of time making sure we did some adjustments to address some of the issues that players were encountering. There were some that were a little too difficult / just very they kind of developed kind of late, so we can touch on everything. But in 2.1, the idea is that we would do some major shifts on some systems that I think we've already talked about, and some more to come in this chat, as well as add some new abilities, some new content, and then also improve the balance of the game. We can move on to grenades.
Okay.
Grenades have been in the game for a very long time, but we can argue that, especially now after the TTK changes, they've definitely fallen behind. We had a lot of different thoughts on how grenades should work in Co 3. Particularly with the older TTK, we didn't want them to completely define infantry combat, so that's why, to a large extent, they don't really do that much damage. Now, we still are of the mind where grenades shouldn't be the end-all of infantry combat. Like, whether or not you miss or dodge a grenade determines if you win or lose. However, we have identified that grenades have just not felt good to use. They often, especially the basic grenades, these are the ones we're looking at, so not the bundle grenade or the gammon, but instead your normal pineapples, your stick grenades. Those haven't really hit the mark, especially when you get like a proper direct hit.
Mhm.
It hasn't really had that moment of satisfaction. So we've wanted to tune these up, essentially. So most of these grenades are getting just a buff across the board, where they are doing more damage. We have focused it more on the center. Maybe Darren, you can speak more to that, but yeah.
Yep. So the detail for the majority of the changes that we have done for grenades is the small area where you can kill the model has been increased a little bit, and you do a little bit more damage in the small zone where the initial blast is. Most of our grenades, however, still maintain the same damage fall off they would have of up the maximum ranges. So if you still dodge the grenade but get clipped by it, you're not going to take a massive amount of damage, but you'll mainly notice the changes to the grenades on the German stick grenade, for example, where that grenade was kind of notorious, where you could just take one step away from the grenade and you would just take no damage from it, despite seemingly still being on top of the grenade.
Right.
Yeah.
We've also made a significant change to the rifle grenades of how they work. So rifle grenades have the smallest blast radius of all grenades, and their drop off is very noticeable once they've hit their drop off mark, but within essentially a 2 meter area. They have the largest kill radius of all the grenades, making rifle grenades particularly effective at displacing units from cover or attacking team weapons.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about what we're doing to grenades, but what's sort of the intended effect on the actual gameplay and the moment-to-moment action?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, but the main idea is to get those direct hits to feel more satisfying.
Mhm.
But in general, I think grenades have been somewhat underpowered in terms of their ability to kick enemies out of garrisons, to displace or to kill team weapons, and also just against more powerful squads. A lot of squads can kind of just eat grenades and keep going. Now, to a certain extent, the all of these will still stay true. We didn't want grenades to completely nuke units
Mhm.
because we didn't want the infantry micro to be, entirely focused on, hey, when is my opponent going to throw a grenade? When am I going to dodge it? Slash the vice versa of when am I going to throw a grenade? It's an important part of the play cycle or of the infantry combat, but we didn't want it to be more important than, for example, getting the right cover, flanking your opponent, managing your units across the entire front. We still want those to be more important. However, so I think people notice the grenades will be better and more impactful, and just you need to pay more attention to that. But at the same time, the game will still play the way the infantry combat hasn't been completely changed.
Okay. I know you also mentioned stealth. What are we changing there for when we're sneaking around the map with certain units?
You want to talk about that?
For stealth, so we've lowered the detection range for all normal units. So detectors still have the 25-meter detection radius, but we've lowered everyone back to 10, and we've done significant changes to accommodate this, mainly to the battlefield espionage battle group, because one of the reasons why regular detection got raised back in the day was due to espionage. So
Yes.
now we are changing it so that the espionage camouflage auras from both the Funk Wagon and the Intel Disruption Beacon now only provide you the camouflage if you're in cover, similar to how other units act to get their camouflage. So you will be in the aura of a Funk Wagon. You will no longer be invisible while in the open. You'll need to at least touch a piece of cover to get the camouflage, and then you would have that short delay period where you still have camouflage when moving to the next piece of cover, but you won't be able to do things like you have 3 Panzer Grenadiers in the open with a Funk Wagon behind them and be able to walk up to someone's machine gun down an open road.
Right. So are we making these changes because we felt stealth was just too strong, or was there another intent here?
So there were a few factors pulling into this. Two changes that I think is worth mentioning before we go into that is you now have an indicator when you are entering cover. So there should be better visibility of both, and also of the basic detection radius, because we've noted that the experience of ambushing people with things like commandos, for example, so the close range squads, wasn't very good. They would detect you from a little bit further than you would expect, and it would be somewhat difficult to kind of get that perfect ambush off. Whereas now it'll be easier. The reticule isn't perfect because it's centered on the squad. However, sight is based on entities.
Mhm.
However, it should be a lot easier to pull off. So we wanted to improve this. We also just noted that espionage in particular was just not really that fun to play against when you had these stealth blobs kind of running around. So we wanted to retain that core identity of like this subterfuge, hard to see kind of battle group without enabling that kind of play. So
Right.
so there are other changes to espionage. We can cover that a little bit later, but yeah. So these stealth changes should make units like commandos feel better, but detectors should be just as powerful as before against camoed units.
Okay. Darren, anything else to add about stealth?
No, we just added, as Jason mentioned, we added a bunch of quality of life as well. So not only do we have the indicator for when you're entering cover and then how long it takes for your camouflage to activate, we now also show on the units an indicator for how long you can stay in the open before your camouflage disappears. So
Gotcha.
you'll be better able to judge what if you're able to make it to the next piece of cover or not to keep your camouflage active.
Okay. So next up on my list here is artillery. So can you tell me, what are we doing here? What's the big shift with our artillery, and why are we making these changes?
So, you want me to go with this one? So, for the first change, we're making a number of changes to the emplaced howitzers. We are making it so that our emplaced howitzers take less damage from on-field artillery, because we noticed that emplaced howitzers, when you know where they are and artillery starts reaching a certain amount of like pieces for either side, it's very easy to just remove them from the battlefield, especially with like units like the Bishop, the Stuka, the West, because they're able to drive into range, fire off their barrage, and then drive back, where your emplacement kind of just has to take the shots as they come and hope you survive. So they are going to take less damage from on-field artillery, and also we are making the change that the self-propelled guns themselves will also be easier to kill. We are lowering their health, so a direct artillery hit from most of the artillery guns will be able to destroy them, so it means it's easier to counter battery these artillery units and deal with them for the stationary emplacements. And also makes it easier if you get a unit into the back line to destroy units like the Stuka, the Bishop, and the West. That's because their ability to move around the battlefield is a major factor to their survivability.
Okay.
We're also reducing. We're also adjusting the Stuka's vet ability. So right now its creeping barrage is very lethal, as in it will hit a very small area. So to players who don't immediately notice that they're getting hit by it, this can often kill or wipe squads. We're changing this to be a larger area of effectability, where it will now creep across a larger part of the map. So it will be more useful in terms of saturating an area. However, it will be less effective at killing one specific target, which wasn't really the identity we wanted for that ability. The Bishop is also getting toned back a little bit. Its power level is still too high, even after some of the adjustments we made in 05. So hopefully both of these artillery pieces will be less oppressive in the next patch.
Okay. Have we done anything with the cooldown on these abilities? Because I know there's a lot of feedback about cooldowns not necessarily being tied together. Is that like a design decision that we want to stick with, or is it something that we're looking at?
Yeah. So the Stuka no longer has a perfect double barrage anymore. So when you use the vet ability, the creeping barrage, it will use a reduced cooldown. So we still won't set it on one shared cooldown between the two barrages, because we found that to be too restrictive. We want the ability for players to throw a barrage and still have something available soon-ish to respond to an enemy blob. Or in the reverse of, like, if you see a large enemy force, you drop artillery on it and it moves out of the way after taking some damage, you can hit it again. We want to preserve this, but at the same time, we did note that like the double barrages were really strong, particularly on the Stuka, so we are reducing that. It is still present on the Wesp, mostly because I think with the new adjustments to the power level of the unit, it is mostly acceptable, but we'll keep an eye on that. If the feedback continues to be negative on that, then we can adjust it. And obviously the Bishop doesn't have the double barrage,
Right.
but yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts there on artillery?
Yeah, overall, just wanted to share some thoughts on the artillery paths. We want artillery to be a major part of team games, but we have noted that right now it is just too omnipresent. Every time you kind of engage the enemy, artillery gets dropped on you. It's a combination between too many sources and some of those sources not having enough counterplay / just too strong. So again, the Stuka is a good example of this. We are attacking the Stuka without reducing the power level of its lethality, essentially, by making it easier to kill. So if you flank it, it'll be much easier to kill than before with the health nerfs. And then also, so they'll be more vulnerable to both dives and counterfire. And we're hoping this increases the risk-reward of artillery to an appropriate level. Because we want to maintain that lethality against large infantry formations. We don't want players to be able to move them across the front at will, essentially.
Yeah. So all of this sounds like good news for our large team game players, because I know artillery has been very dominant and very oppressive for quite some time.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want to talk about minesweepers?
Yep. So this is a fairly minor change, but this should help our sweeping engineers who have a little bit of trouble getting veterancy because a minesweeper engineer is not a particularly strong combat unit. So we have made a change that allows minesweeping units to get experience when mines are swept. So currently the values are set to like 5 times the cost of the mine. So a mine will give you 150 experience, which seems like a lot, but you need to actually sweep quite a few mines to actually get a unit to even veterancy 1. And given that these units with the minesweepers are going to struggle to be effective in combat many of the cases that they will find themselves in, and we think it's fine that they will get a decent chunking of experience just because of how long it takes, and the role as utility and support units in the army
Yeah.
rather than as combat units.
Okay, cool. Sounds like a nice little quality of life change to help out those engineers. Do you want to move into veterancy? Are we making some adjustments there?
So, as a part of this patch, we're doing more unit uniqueness work. So we're doing more changes to adjust some specific units. I think we can actually talk about it kind of in line together with the factions rather than kind of its own pass right now. But essentially, this patch, the things where we're looking at is there was a few units that were kind of not hitting the mark. The Centaur is a good example. We'll talk about that one. And the other target was some of the Veterancy 3 bonuses we've noted haven't really quite hit the mark. I think some units have reached that level of like when they reach Vet 3, they feel there's a satisfying difference between them and regular units. We want players to feel rewarded when they hit Veterancy 3 on units. However, some bonuses I think we were a little either too conservative or they weren't as relevant as we were expecting them. So there will be some adjustments coming to them.
Okay. So do we want to get into the factions and we can talk
Yes.
about that stuff there? Yeah. All right. Darren, do you want to start with the U.S. forces?
Yes, U.S. forces. We have made a considerable number of changes to this faction, so we wanted to help move the USF away from always being the infantry support center or army, where it essentially becomes the main pick. So we made a large number of changes to them. The first major change is that we have moved the captain into the HQ. So you still need a support center to purchase him, and the ISC still gives him for free. But you will now be able to buy the captain with either mechanized support center or air support center because the captain plays such a critical role for USF that it didn't seem right to just lock him behind a single support center. He not only increases the experience of all your units, his ability to call in mortar barrages, mark targets, or get a sprint on a unit who is suppressed are just such key components to how USF plays that, yeah, is one of the main reasons we are moving him back into like the core army for all support centers.
Okay, amazing. Finally, justice for the captain.
Yeah. So we're hoping to see some flexibility. So like a vehicle build using a mark target captain, for example, or other changes. So to go alongside this with USF, the other change that we're doing is we're moving bars out of essentially tier 1.5. So right now, bars require you to get the support center, and we are changing that so that you can get it right from the start of the game. So the moment you reach the fuel requirement and you pay it, you can get bars immediately. So something we've noticed over time is that the bar rifle builds have kind of fallen out of favor for a few different reasons. Players have figured out how to counter them particularly well, especially with kind of how Wehrmacht has shaken out. And also just they're often, the other builds are just often stronger. And we wanted to make bars better or like more present in the USF faction, but without necessarily making bars that much stronger. So this is essentially what we landed with. Now USF can opt for essentially a very early push, kind of Ko-1-esque of hitting your opponent with a lot of upgraded rifles. However, beware because you still need to get your support center eventually, and going early bars can heavily delay getting any of the other tech options, which does leave you vulnerable to many of the counters that are still around. So, yeah, we're hoping players this opens up some interesting barracks play
Okay.
for USF.
Darren, anything else from the USF that we want to call out?
Yeah, for the Mechanized Support Center, we have added a new upgrade and moved one of the upgrades out. So the Mechanized Support Center 76mm Sherman will now be found on the Tank Depot. This will allow the US to scale their standard Shermans better for all the support centers for the late game. Helps smooth out some of the power between, if I have the support center, do I not have the support center? But in exchange, we are also giving back an upgrade. Currently calling it fine-tuned barrels, which increases the range of all vehicle-based machine guns by 5 and increases the amount of bullets they fire by 33%, which is a considerable impact to their power. And this affects all the U.S. vehicles. So the half-track, the quad, the Greyhound, Sherman, and it gives them the U.S. a bit more distinction in how their vehicles fight, where a lot of their power is in the machine guns, and now you can further improve the machine guns of those vehicles if you're going MSC, where ISC gives things like the economy bonuses and mines for your infantry.
Okay. Jason, anything else that you want to call out about the US?
So those are the major changes. We're hoping this addresses some of the key issues that USF has in both its build variety and in terms of some of its performance in team games as well. We found that, for example, the bar timing to be pretty subpar in team games in particular. But also another example is the viability of the Sherman would struggle without the 76mm upgrade. So one of the main reasons we're moving it to the tank pool is to allow large Sherman play to be essentially viable with any support center pick. This way you could go ASC Sherman Airborne, for example, and have, decent anti-tank late game while also having, some of the other elements of the US faction. We're also doing some adjustments. So the Sherman Dozer got a new ability. So it now can fire essentially a satchel at a target location rather than using one of its barrages. And then the M8 Scott saw a bunch of changes to a lot of its numbers, which essentially moves its role from kind of its current mid-range to a shorter range target, but with a longer range barrage, which should change the role of the unit or some of the use cases of the unit.
Okay. Should we just move on to the Wehrmacht?
Yep.
Yeah.
And do you want me to start this one?
Sure.
Yeah, so Wehrmacht, think as a faction, is fairly stable, but we are making significant adjustments to the Jaeger squad and further adjustment to the Wehrmacht's advanced infantry. We want Wehrmacht to play different from the other factions where your core infantry power is not in the Grenadier here, so we are making adjustments to them so they're a little bit less economy efficient and you're less able to merge in the squads constantly over the course of the game. We want your primary power to be from either the Panzer Grenadier or the Jaeger squad that you will purchase around the 4 to 5 minute point of the game, and they will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And we have done some changes to make them generally better than their allied counterparts in one-on-one engagements, because you generally will not have multiples of these squads where the allies will have 3 to 4 riflemen or infantry sections where you might only have 2 Panzer Grenadiers maximum that you can support throughout the entire game.
Okay. So I know the Coastal Reserves also got a little bit of love. Do you want to talk about that?
Yep. No, we also gave the Coastal Reserves a little bit of more powerful when they get to veterancy in terms of their firepower, but we also added a veterancy 1 ability to them that because we've also made a change that allows you to garrison any type of bunker. It can be an anti-tank bunker, it can be a machine gun bunker, medical repair. All those bunkers can now be garrisoned. And so we've also given, to facilitate this, the Coastal Reserves a new ability called Stronghold Defenders, where when they're in garrisons, they will deploy a Beretta machine gun and essentially fight from inside with a more powerful weapon. It's quite a bit more powerful than their standard guns, but they can only be using it from garrisons. But because now you're able to just have more garrisons as a coastal player, it makes sense for you to get your full firepower to be forced to enter those structures
Okay.
and fight from.
Jason, any other thoughts on the Wehrmacht changes?
So to give a little bit more detail for the Jaegers, essentially what we're doing is we're reducing kind of their durability and we're making their lethality against infantry higher when upgraded. So what people will notice is essentially the anti-tank version of the Jaeger is essentially just losing power, whereas the G43 version of the Jaeger will be gaining power. That's kind of the shift that we want it to be. Jaegers right now, their main role is kind of like that AT anchor for the for the faction, and we want to shift that to be a little bit less effective in that role, making players rely on other tools, while making the anti-infantry component a bigger part of the identity of the unit. So this is kind of like we're kind of doing this in bits because in the last change we removed the smoke off the Panzerschreck, so we're kind of doing this in bits.
I'll add one more. We also feel we can give a bit more power to the Jaegers in general because we have done a change to the Jaeger squad as part of unit uniqueness. Is we have pulled the camouflage off the Jaeger. They just no longer have the ability to camouflage, and we've given them an ability to instead slow units that they hit with their rifles. So,
Okay.
this makes the Jaeger a bit more powerful in like the direct combat engagements, or we feel we can give Jaegers these buffs to their rifles because they're no longer going to have camouflage at all times to spike up their damage. It's for a
Right.
short period of time in every engagement they encounter.
Okay. Should we move to the British forces?
Yep.
All
You
right.
can go with this one.
So UKF is seeing a few smaller changes. The main one being the team weapon training will now affect emplacements. It will give a flat 120 health. We wanted the team weapon training has been a bit niche, and it probably still will be, but we wanted it to be more viable in a few different other strats. The other buff that we're doing is the CWT Polston, the AA version of the truck, is seeing a sizable increase where now the setup time is much shorter, making the unit a lot more nimble in combat. So players will probably notice that. We're also rounding it out with a small armor buff for the Matilda. We've noticed that players or the Matilda hasn't really been able to do that well. Post / its nerfs / also the meta introducing the heavy tanks, which naturally just makes the Matildas slightly less useful. So we wanted to promote its original role of being like a very good breakthrough infantry tank by essentially giving back some of its durability.
Okay. Darren, anything else that you want to cover with
Yeah,
the British?
we've added for unit uniqueness in the British faction. We've done two major changes to the units. The first one is the BL 5.5 howitzer. So we've removed precision shot, and instead, every time you call in the forward observer barrage from the Recce section, Dingo, or the Gurkhas, the BL 5.5 will now also fire airburst shells into the target area. So
Okay.
it creates a bit better synergy with those sort of units to call it like strengthening your forward observer barrage when your BL 5.5 doesn't have any targets in the field. We've also done a significant change to the Centaur where it gets a new ability called Hesh Rounds. This is a toggle ability where you fire direct line anti armor shells at the enemy. These shells themselves don't deal a lot of damage, it's though they will deal some damage on deflection, unlike most other tank guns. The main purpose of this ability is we want the Centaur to be able to contribute in an armor fight without being the main anti-armor component. So let's say you're bringing two Crusaders and a Centaur. The Centaur can still engage enemy armor by debuffing it. It applies a considerable debuff on enemy vehicles that it hits with the Hesh round. We're looking around 30% accuracy and rate of fire. So this allows you to essentially gang up on enemy vehicles when the Centaur is working with other vehicles.
Yeah.
Essentially greatly lowering the enemy's effectiveness and allowing you to take fights that you normally couldn't do.
Okay. And Jason, any comments on like the intent of changing some of these abilities?
Yeah, so we in the last patch we made the Centaur a tier 4 unit, and it was missing kind of the final component to make it justify essentially that new spot. And to do so, we're adding this essentially this ability to deal with armor, or at least support your anti-tank against armor. The effectiveness of the Hesh rounds won't be that high in a direct fight. For example, this won't allow a Centaur to fight something like a P4, for example. But the idea is so that now it can properly justify its role of being an anti-infantry specialist, while also having some anti-tank capability.
Okay. And last, of course, we have the Africa Corps. Darren, do you want to outline some of the stuff that we're doing there?
Yep, so as you heard, one of the big things at the Africa Corps we did mention earlier was we did a big change to battlefield espionage on both the Funk Wagon and the Intel Disruption Beacons. Those no longer just give you the camouflage outright. You need to be in cover in the auras of those units to be able to get it. We've also made significant changes to the Caro as a vehicle. Now it no longer starts with its Hall machine gun. We found that was a pretty unique little weapon that it had in the Hall, but you would never really notice it in combat.
Right.
So we have now stripped the stock Caro of its little Hall machine gun, but now you can add it back in, and that now comes with significantly more anti-infantry firepower. And we've also changed the veterancy ability of the Caro to incentivize it to be less effective when used in large numbers with large numbers of Italian units. Now it's more capable of operating on its own, but its ability now only procs when you're getting close to enemy medium and heavy vehicles, giving the Caro a little bit more punch in the late game against those more powerful vehicles, though it'll still generally lose one-on-one without support.
Okay. Jason, what about you? What do you want to call out here with the Africa Corps? I know we also made a change to the 8-rad. I don't know if you wanted to cover that now.
The 8-rad changes we're actually we're working on. The current changes to the 8-rad, we have the turret traverse increase. Regarding DAC, one of the major issues it is currently facing is kind of that mid-game vehicle timing. For a lot of different reasons, the 8-rad hasn't really been as useful as something like the flak reeling for quite a while now. We're still finding ways to do so without kind of reintroducing the issues that the 8-rad used to cause, which was essentially it would just take over games by being the end-all anti-infantry tool, / also being able to threaten to end games altogether by diving AT. So we don't want to bring that back, but at the same time, we do want to re-equivalate essentially the options that DAC has available to it. We're very aware the flak reeling is overwhelmingly the better option in most situations. And for example, in this patch, we are giving it a relevant nerf where the armor piercing rounds, so the Vet 1 ability, will no longer slow enemy vehicles. This is a pretty major change considering usually you need this in conjunction with other tools to survive enemy light vehicle timings. Now, as kind of both compensation for this and also as a general update, the Panzerjäger infantry unit is receiving some major buffs. It is going to most likely decrease in cost. Because since its original inception, it was costed to be essentially an anti-everything unit when it used to have its LMG. Right. And if throughout the updates we've removed these / the role of AT rifles has also just reduced in the game in general. Kind of due to some of the shifts of both PTK and also to vehicles. So this is an update to essentially give some power back to that unit. We've noticed that people essentially never really hard build it. They do call it in with the call-in a lot, and that's another issue that we're looking to address, probably in the longer term. But we wanted to make the hard build Panzerjägers a bit better.
Okay, Darren, anything else with the DAC that we want to let players know about?
I think we have covered most of the major areas of DAC. We're mainly giving them some small buffs here and there, or to help smooth some transitions, particularly like between a little bit on the infantry, a little bit between their vehicle. Also, they're a little bit less swingy on like these are the power units of DAC that you have to survive the game.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So it seems like in the last update, in the tuning update, we were just sort of making these. I mean, it's in the name, tuning changes to some of the big stuff that we introduced in 2.0. But it seems like we're taking some larger swings in Opal Scorpion 2.1 as well. Do we maybe want to just wrap up sort of final thoughts on what are both your goals, sort of as the balance team? What are you hoping these changes accomplish for the multiplayer meta? What are you hoping to see from players? Just sort of big picture thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, probably the biggest thing is this patch, we focused a lot on the system improvements. Some of them we didn't talk too much in detail in just this section, but many of the gameplay improvements that are coming in this patch are also just built by us. Like, we're a pretty small team now, so we're kind of doing double duty in a few different areas. Another set of improvements that we're hoping that will change the meta a bit is due to towing. I mean, there's 2 or 3 units that are basically built around towing that are quite important, and we're hoping these units will be essentially just better now that towing is better. But like same things with breach, the grenades, the improved stealth. Like all of these are updates to systems and kind of getting rid of some of their hard edges or improving some of their or getting rid of some of their flaws. With the artillery changes, again, we're hoping to see the overall health of team games kind of improve. We're making steady ground with kind of improving some of the lesser used units. Sometimes in slower steps, sometimes all at once. We're kind of jumping around. Yeah, anything you want to add, Darren?
No, I think that covers most of it. The big one is we are doing a lot of system improvements, as Jason has said. So hopefully we will be seeing a lot more of that in the game now, particularly on systems like Breach. Each having played with the new Breach, you will find a night and day difference on how you interact with it in the game. Just the ability to just take a garrison the moment the enemy leaves to avoid the breach is massive, rather than having to wait for the animation to play out to then enter the building.
Okay, very cool. So Jason, Darren, just wanted to thank you again for taking some time to walk us through all of the multiplayer focus changes that are going to be coming in this update. So I think we will leave things there. And of course, we'll have the patch notes releasing the day that the update goes live, and everyone can dive into those then. So thank you both, and we'll end it there. That's going to do it for today. As always, if you want to stay up to date on all the latest Company of Heroes news, be sure to follow us on your platform of choice: Facebook, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, or Twitch at Company of Heroes. You can also join our Discord server at discord.gg/Relic Entertainment. The Opal Scorpion patch notes will be going up on Steam the morning of June 24th, so be sure to keep an eye out for those. And as always, we'll be watching for your feedback, so please report any bugs or issues to help.relic.com, and we'll jump on any critical issues that might arise. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy the Opal Scorpion update, and we will see you next time.